So let's talk bulk fermentation and proofing with sourdough. What is it and what on earth does it mean, and how do you know when you've got it right? So before you can understand what it is that you're doing with sourdough, you need to actually understand what bulk fermentation is or proofing. And those words are kind of interchangeable, to be honest. So basically, the gluten is developing at this point. If we don't leave it long enough, then we don't have enough gluten in our loaf. And gluten is what makes the dough or the bread rise in the oven. So if it's underproofed, there's not going to be enough gluten, so it won't make it rise properly. And if we overproof it, the gluten develops within the dough, but then it breaks down because we've overproofed it. So again, there's no gluten in the dough when we pop it in the oven. So what we're trying to do is find that middle ground where the gluten has developed, but it's not actually started to break down yet. So there are a number of ways of knowing that that's happened. It's all going on inside there, and we need to know what it's doing, basically. So there are a number of tests to find out how you can do it. My favourite is the dough temperature test, and I'm going to go through that with you. One that's quite popular is the Alloy test, where you take a small pot and you put some of this in, and then you leave it on the side, and once it's doubled inside and it's touched the top of the lid, then you're good to go. The only problem with that is it depends on the temperature of the dough and the recipe that you've used, because not all doughs need to do 100% rise. So it does very much depend on that. Another test which is quite helpful is the poke test. So basically you poke the dough, and if it bounces straight back up again, then that means that it's not ready yet. And if it leaves a massive indentation, then that means it's overproof because it's starting to collapse. The only thing is with that, you need to understand your dough quite a lot, because you're kind of interpreting it rather than it actually giving you the answers. It's not a particularly scientific way of doing it. There are a couple of other tests as well that you can do. People actually even do the float test with this dough. Again, that is open to interpretation, because of course I did the float test once because somebody said take a piece of the dough, pop it in the jar of water, and if it floats, it's fine. So I did that and it didn't float. So then, of course, people came forward and said, oh, you didn't cut the dough right. And I was like, what do you mean? They said you tore it off rather than like cut the dough off. And I was like, okay, again, it's open to interpretation. So that was fine. I tried it again and it kind of worked. But actually, my favourite is the dough temperature test. So what you need is a thermometer, and we put it in the dough. Now, the one main question I get is, what should the temperature be? There is no correct temperature. It's determined by what the temperature is. So there's another creator who's not on TikTok, unfortunately, but on all the other platforms, called The Sourdough Journey. Amazing couple of guys that sit down and work out all of these different experiments and all sorts of things. And they've created a really lovely chart that you follow. So it depends on what your temperature is. So if your temperature of your dough is, let's say, 18 degrees, I think it says leave it for something like 14 to 16 hours. And if the temperature of your dough is 27 degrees Celsius, then you may only want to leave it for 5 or 6 hours. And then all of the other temperatures in between are graduated. So my dough here is currently 20 degrees. I haven't got the chart in front of me. And that's what you need to do. That is the simplest way. And that for me is the most scientific way for me. The temperature says that much. I check the chart. It says leave it 8 hours. I leave it 8 hours. Or thereabouts. Obviously it does change over time, and you might get a warmer day or a colder day throughout the day, and then you refer to the new temperature. So if you had been leaving it for 8 hours and now your dough has got warmer, in total you only then maybe need to leave it for 6 hours. So you do need to keep an eye on the temperature throughout, just to be sure that the dough temperature hasn't actually changed. But I personally would say that the dough temperature method is definitely, for beginners, the easiest way, because as you then start to learn your dough, you then go, oh, okay, I kind of know what it should be looking like when it's ready now, because of course I know what it looked like last time and that turned out really well. So now I'm looking for a similar dough. Now, of course, as your temperatures change over the seasons, your dough's going to change. As we're heading into winter now, you are going to see very big differences with your dough. And that's where this is going to come in handy. You don't want to be going off your thermostat in your house. It's taking the temperature of the actual dough. You will find that from room to room and place to place, your dough will be very different depending on where you put it. I can put it at one end of my kitchen and it's a degree or two higher than if I put it at the other end, because it depends on where the windows are, where the oven is, and all sorts of other things as well. It also depends on what surface it's sitting on, whether it's a granite surface, a wooden surface, what type of bowl it's in, whether it's near a drafty door, a drafty window. So if you haven't got one of these thermometers, definitely invest in one, because it's going to take all of the guesswork out of your bulk fermentation or your proofing and help you get a really, really good, successful loaf of bread at home. And as always, do drop any comments or anything, and we'll see if we can help you out if you're struggling with your sourdough, because sourdough shouldn't be complicated. You should be able to make a beautiful loaf of bread at home.